just want to introduce myself for anybody who hasn't come to the sample lectures before. My name is Kara, and I work in the student recruitment office. So if you have any questions about admissions today at all, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. And then joined with me today, we have Amy Burns. So Amy is the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs and an Associate Professor in the Workland School of Education. And today she's going to talk about the aims of education for you all. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll just pass it off to Amy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So here we go. I'm going to try and share my screen. You never know. Sometimes Zoom is with us and sometimes it's against us. But looks like today it's with us. So that's great. Everyone, I'd like to welcome you to this lecture. Just so you know, I'm probably not going to be able to keep my eye on the chat while I'm speaking, but I am going to ask you at several points throughout tonight's lecture to jot your thoughts down in that chat box, and we will, at those points, make sure that we check it out, okay? But do feel free to put any questions that you like in there. Make sure that you take the time to really, think about some of the questions that I'll be asking, and to really think about your own experiences with education. So I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name is Amy Burns. I am the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs in Education. That means our teacher education program. So the program that I'm in charge of provides the degree that you need if you want to be a teacher in K-12. So elementary or secondary school. My research areas are primarily leadership, but I also do a fair amount on what's called educational philosophy. And that is what I am going to share with you this evening. This is actually a sample lecture that comes from one of the courses that we teach in our program. It would be one of the very first courses that students will take, called Education 201, issues Introduction to Educational Studies. And this course is one that asks us to consider the really big questions. So before we even start to think about how we teach, we have to begin to think about why we teach. And so we are going to take a look tonight, quickly, at the aims of education. So the aims of education is, as I said, a philosophy of education course. And many students might ask, why do you need to understand philosophy of education if you want to go into a classroom and be a good teacher? And it's very simple. The theory, the philosophy that underpins education, that is what makes practice. So all those teachers in all those classrooms who are doing all these innovative and unique things, these things were, to start with, they were theory, or they were a philosophy. Montessori is a philosophy, for example, and it asks us to really question the big fundamental underpinnings of education. Now, these questions are really important because these are the questions that animate our debates around the province. So we all know that there have been several debates happening in education, and we can see how these play out in the province. For example, we've had a new curriculum. That is a debate that has played out around our province. These debates are ongoing, and they will always be present. So if you're to join a teacher education program, and every teacher education program in the province has what's called field experience or practicum. This is when you go out into a classroom and you actually teach alongside a partner teacher or a mentor teacher. These debates are ongoing while you're in those spaces too. And so you get to actually see these debates live out, right? And we get to ask ourselves, how do we contribute to these debates as future teachers? Well, one of the best ways that we do that is by becoming what's called a reflective practitioner. So a reflective practitioner means that you can actually consider what you do, you can look back on it, and then you can actually analyze it using both theory and practice. So theory and practice are two tightly interconnected ideas. Without theory, we don't have practice. because we need theory in order to get to practice. And then without practice, we'll never have new theory because we won't know what kinds of changes and iterations it needs to go through. And how do we do this? By reflecting, by thinking through what worked, what didn't, why did we do what we thought we were going to do? And then why might we have changed our mind right in the middle of it? So this is what it means to be a reflective practitioner. So I'm going to ask you, just, in the chat box there, if you can just take a second and consider your own reflective practice. So when you think back, right, or maybe you're still there, maybe you're in high school right now, but when you think on that high school experience, what do you think was the main idea that you were being taught? So was it to be a great thinker? Was it to be an empathetic person? Was it to be a good listener? Just think back and reflect for a second on what you think the aim of your education was. And just take a second and put that in the chat box for me. So while you're thinking about that, I'm going to introduce you to someone named David Smith. And in 1999, David Smith said the following, and I absolutely love this quote. It's a little old now, but I think it still stands true. So David Smith's idea of the aims of education is, he refers to it as a project, okay? The project of education arises when certain people determine that the world would fare better if certain other people, especially but not exclusively young people, learned certain things. This has been the underpinning of education since the Industrial Revolution, since there was an initial aim to education. So when we think about education, one of the first things that we think about is, what should students learn? This is the curriculum debate that we mentioned earlier in the slideshow, right? So what we have here is a group of people will get together and determine that it's probably best if other people, children or young adults, learned particular things. So when you reflect back on your own educational experience, you can ask yourself, did it seem important to somebody that I learned something particular, right? So we see here, maybe it was to increase critical thinking skills. I love that that's potentially an aim of education. I mean, think about the incredible ability for a society to be able to really analyze something, if that's the case, right? To bring out humanism and to use it to help people to make the world a better place. I love that. So when we think about the project of education and considering what it is that other people might want certain other people to know, perhaps it connects to those. But the fact is that the debate exists that certain people get to decide what other people should know to become many things. It could be a better student. It could be a more well-rounded human being. It could be an informed voter. It could be a functioning member of society. There's a lot of things that it could lead to. But in the end, there is something that people need to know. So I'd like you to take a look at this picture. I'm going to show you a few pictures of classrooms now. And in the chat, I would like you, please, if you wouldn't mind, to write down some words. What do you see in this picture? What do you see about this classroom? What does it make you think? So just take a second and put some words in the chat. What do you see when you look at this picture? I can get us started here. I see lots of colors, right? This looks like an engaged classroom. It looks like students are Interested, right? I'm seeing engagement, creative, comfortable, right? Oh, interesting. Other cultures may think it is distracting, right? That there's some distraction here, potentially. It's a busy classroom. Students look motivated. I mean, look at this one little guy here. He can't even stay in his seat. He's so excited, right? Enthusiasm. There does seem to be an element of competition, doesn't there? That's a good one too. This picture of a classroom is a fairly typical North American classroom. I think I took it from a teacher magazine that's out of the United States. You can see lots of colors, you can see the posters, you can see, all these things. You see the smartboard there that has whatever it is that they're learning on it. Small class size, yeah, I think that might just show a little bit the age of the picture, but that's okay. But here we have, look, this, and the teacher's also engaged, right? The teacher looks interested and happy to be there. And one of the things I also love, if you look right off to the right-hand side as you're looking at your screen, you'll also see there's some cages there. I think there might be some animals in this classroom, right, that children are interacting with. So yes, what we see here is something that I think is, for many who went to school in maybe Canada, the United States, we see something fairly familiar here. But there are lots of different kinds of classrooms, and they all help us to answer that question, what is the aim of education? So think of all those descriptors that you gave. They are all answers to that big question, what is the aim of education? This is also a classroom. This is a fascinating classroom full of many of the same descriptors that we used for the last one. So I'd like you to take a moment. What do you see in this classroom? This one has some differences and some similarities. I see lots of engagement and attentiveness. Great word. Yeah. I see lots of attentiveness. I also see a multi-age classroom here. I see different generations learning together, right? I see, I can still tell who the teacher is, right? I see that we have students who have given their attention to a particular person. I see a connection to nature here that is slightly different than perhaps the first picture. This classroom too is answering the question, what are the aims of education, right? This classroom is showing us a connection, right? A connection to nature. We see students paying attention to someone's instruction, right? We see different ages working together in this room, right? In this room without walls. So we can see here that this particular group also answers that question, but maybe in a slightly different way, right? So maybe in this particular classroom, the aims are slightly different, but there are still aims and there are still things that particular people are needing to learn. Okay, I'm going to show you another picture, right? I'm going to show you another picture, and this one shows yet another very different aim of education. So here we have a different classroom. Take a second and look at this classroom. Just so you are aware, this is a classroom of adult learners who are doing, it's almost like, it's professional learning, but for the business world, let's put it that way. And it's a really old picture, okay? So what do we notice about this classroom? What do we see? Yeah, we don't even need to see the instructor to know that there's an instructor and they are in charge, right? Because do you notice we don't even see who the teacher is in this one? There's some person up here off the side of the picture, but we don't actually even need to see them. We see that everyone is facing the same way. There's, yeah, isn't it funny? I love that word, Heather. It's obedience in this picture. It's not engagement. I don't know that we could argue there's great engagement. I see a lot of very sort of, how do I want to put it? There's not a lot of animation on any of these faces, but they are all looking the same way. It's very, we can tell it's very instructor based. There doesn't appear to be a lot of room for discussion. So this classroom also helps us to answer the question, what are the aims of education? In here, we would argue that the aims of education in this classroom are transfer of knowledge from an expert to those who need that information, that there is control, that there is obedience, right? That there is an understanding that the instructor in this case is perhaps considered an expert, right? And that there wouldn't be a lot of need for discussion because one person in this room has all of the information. Yeah, someone says you could really engage this group by calling out some buzzwords. Yes, you absolutely could. I feel like that might happen. Absolutely. So you can see how classrooms and teachers and students, but by the very nature of how these things interact, they begin to tell a story about why we educate children. So one of the things that we've been hearing about an awful lot is virtual reality. And of course, now the upsurge in AI, artificial intelligence. So this is an article from a magazine, right? Could virtual reality be the future of training and education? So you see here, we have some kids. They look like they're having a great time. It looks like they might be seeing something interesting there. They might be trying something out. I want you to take a second and in the chat, could you please for me consider the pros and cons of things like, so for example, what is the pro of having students on virtual reality in, say, a nature setting versus going to that nature setting? So what are the ways in which things like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, how do they change slightly the aims of education? How do they actually change the kinds of questions that we might ask? What do we have here? Yeah, so true. Yeah, you can't deny it. A virtual field trip to a forest is a whole lot less paperwork than a real field trip to a forest. Less red tape, absolutely. You might also argue that it engages students in a really particular way, right? One of the things I'm always fascinated by is the comfort level that even very small children have with technology. So someone who's like me, who, grew up before we had personal computers, I'll just leave it at that. To me, the idea of going to a virtual forest versus a real one, there's no question. But we have generations of people now who might actually see it as absolutely more convenient. It might give the same kind of feeling. Whether you feel that way or not is actually not the point. What VR and AI do for us is they actually start to open up that question of what is the aim of education. So now the aim of education might actually be to be able to engage well, not just with humans or even non-humans, but now non-living. And now what does that mean? Does that change that very core set of knowledges that David Smith claimed we would have to decide people need? It's really fascinating when you think about how this will change ideas around what counts as knowledge. Will it be important anymore? Once these things really take off, will it be important to be able to go outside and recognize a plant, for example, or will that start to die out? One of the one of the tasks actually, and it is really a task that I'm always fascinated when I see in elementary classrooms. I do visit a lot of classrooms, and one of the things I'm fascinated when I see is young children struggling to count money. And this is one of those examples where something has shifted in our society to such an extent that we've started to question its utilitarianism. Do young children need to learn to count money, or do they need to understand the abstract concept that is money? Because, of course, very few people actually use bills and coins anymore. This is really speaking to that, right? It changes the knowledge that we need to understand. So really what happens here is that we then start to approach education by responding to really key questions. The biggest being, why should children be educated? So why do we actually send children and youth to school at all? How should they be educated? That's a big question that we ask in teacher education, because a large part of our program focuses on the various practices and theoretical underpinnings that inform those practices that then get used in a classroom. What should they learn? Where should they learn? Does it matter where that classroom is? And then finally, who should control education? So as we know in the province of Alberta and in every province in Canada, education is controlled provincially, and it is a provincial government that creates curriculum. It's a provincial government that approves the building of new schools and all these sorts of things. And so we need to ask ourselves, I think all the time, given those different aspects, what is our role as teachers, as educators, to have input into that question of who should control education? But these questions will never be settled. So these questions have been asked for decades and decades. They're never settled, and they're going to be a matter of vigorous public debate, right? Anytime there is an election, education will come up. Anytime there is a desire to show a change in some kind of societal belief system, education usually comes to the fore, right? Because various forms of education that we have become accustomed to may just seem normal, right? They're just the way things are. But the aims of education and the way in which we engage with education actually reflect particular values and beliefs with particular political purposes, and therefore they are not neutral. The aims of education are not neutral. They are clearly delineated as societal expectation, and they become entrenched because, of course, one of the things that education does is educate future voters, right? So in our Education 201 course, one of the key purposes is actually to help students re-examine some of those really taken for granted beliefs, right? To kind of see some of those other perspectives that might exist that could be considered equally as valid. And it comes right down to the big ideas and then the school building itself. So often, if you travel, even if you've never been to a place before, you might have noticed it's actually fairly easy to figure out where the school is, right? Certain signs are there, school buildings have a look to them. And so the next time you actually see a school, ask yourself, I wonder how we ended up there, right? How did school buildings and the way in which they're designed, how did they then answer the question, what is the aim of education? And how did we get to this point? Well, someone who has great opinions about how we got to this point is Sir Ken Robinson. Now, unfortunately, Sir Ken Robinson has now passed away, but his legacy lives on in YouTube. I would highly recommend that you look him up. He has done numerous TED Talks, and he is a very engaging speaker. And his idea about the aim of education is that it is creativity. That creativity is the one greatest gift humanity will ever have. That creativity is going to allow us to be able to engage in education and in society in ways that differentiate us from, say, non-human and maybe other kinds of living beings. That human intelligence is richer and more dynamic, and here's where he gets provocative, than we've been led to believe by formal education. So he actually blamed formal education for a lack of creativity. He believed that formal education, with its reliance on bells and periods for subjects and groups of students moving through together simply because they're the same age, that actually what this did was anesthetize young children. It actually got them to shut off their senses, because for 13 years, if you go to kindergarten, for 13 years, we ask students to move through a system that becomes more and more repetitive. Now, understand, this is one person's opinion, but it is a provocative one. He also argues that the very courses that can actually help to combat this are the first courses that get cut when budgets get cut, and that's the arts. So he provides a compelling vision for education that seeks to redefine key terms, right? Things like, what does it mean to have an aesthetic experience? How do we actually make math in the high school, for example, experiential, right? We need to get students to understand what their own passions are and how they are best able to learn. And so this is what he believes. So, and he's had no trouble expressing his opinions about it. So he talks about standardized exams, for example, and he is talking about the UK mostly when he's speaking here. He says, it bothers me when politicians or administrators look at these raw figures across a massive education system and say, math scores are going down, what do? Let's grind out some more math exercises. He sees this need to add this additive piece of education as a real problem. So instead of asking ourselves, what can we do differently? How can we change the aim of education? Instead, what we do is we try to bolster it up by doing what we've always done. And this, Ken Robinson believes, is how schools then go on to talk about standardized exam scores and therefore stifling creativity. It's really a fascinating link. Now, it's not perfect, right? There are definitely critiques to this idea. So I'd like you to take a moment and think, if Ken Robinson was to have his way, and we'll see it here, he would believe that we could improve standardized exam scores, let's say, by doing something completely different. So here he talks about dance programs, and he's saying that when we look at schools with dance programs where kids are involved in dance, he's saying that, there was an example where math scores went up. And it's because they were physically embodied in the experience. So it's not about doing more and more mathematics. It's about looking at the balance of a whole curriculum and what is it that really gets students excited about learning. So let me ask you this. Do you agree with Ken Robinson or do you not? If you could just put it in the chat, that would be great. Do you think that one links to the other? And if so, what do you think we might do with that information? I'm just going to give it a second here. Yeah, we have a few yeses, definitely a link. Yeah, creativity comes to us when our minds are wandering. That is very true, right? That is very true. I realize I can't see you, so I won't ask the question, but the question that I'm always fascinated by is how many people keep a pad of paper and a pen by the bed. I always have one because it's just at that moment where you're drifting off to sleep, that the best idea comes to you, right? So there's really something to be said for that. Yes, well, I will say that Ken Robinson has many, many supporters, but there are a few critiques as well. One being, of course, that it is a slightly utopian view of education. If we were to enact education in the way that Ken Robinson feels would be perfect, it would be an incredibly expensive undertaking. But that doesn't mean there aren't parts of it that we can embrace, right? We just have to, I love how Heather says here, broaden our social understanding of education journeys. Exactly. When we think about the journey of a 5 or a 6-year-old, and then we watch them all the way through, right, to 17, 18 years old, that is a significant portion of their life. And how do we then make sure that they are passionate and engaged, that they are actually finding their own aim for education? All right, so I'm going to end us off here pretty quickly with just a couple of big questions. You don't need to put these in the chat, although you're welcome to if you would like, but there's something I'd like to leave you with. This is about being a reflective practitioner, right? So when you think back, what do you think was the underlying aim or purpose of your 13 years of formal education? And to what extent do you think K-12 education prepared you for the world that you're going to enter? This is one of my favorite questions because, of course, just stop sharing here, because, of course, we refer to school as being the not quite real world, right? So how many of us have ever asked it, oh, what do you want to do when you get out into the real world? But I think if we can start to look at the aim of education as making school the real world, it is, after all, in the real world, maybe then we can start to re-envision some of those big questions that come with education. I'm going to end there. Thank you so much for having me on this webinar tonight. And hopefully we'll be able to speak with some of you soon. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. That was amazing. I'm sure everyone in the webinar tonight really appreciated that. I'm just going to share my screen now and just do a quick presentation for you guys. So this is just talking a little bit more about the University of Calgary in general. So it's all about starting your journey with the University of Calgary. So if any of you have an offer already for UCalgary Fall 2024, congratulations. Or if you're coming to us without submitting an application as of yet, then we're excited to kind of welcome you into the University of Calgary area. So this is just a little bit about our university here. So we were founded in 1966. We have about 28,000 undergraduate students, 5 campuses, and 14 faculties. So we're a pretty large university for not even being 100 years old yet. We are also Canada's entrepreneurial university. We've got quite a bit of money in sponsored research funding. And then these two statistics at the bottom of the slide here are my favorite. So we have a 94% after graduation employment rate and a 95% undergraduate retention rate. The undergraduate retention rate is my personal favorite because it just goes to show student life satisfaction on campus. Basically, what the undergraduate retention rate means is that 95% of students who come to us for their first year will stay with us for their entire degree. So that's a pretty hefty amount of students who stick around, which is really nice. And then this is just a little bit about our admissions information. So the general requirements for all of our programs is that we're going to be looking at your admission based on 5 faculty-specific grade 12 classes, and the admission is competitive. So we are going to be looking at your admissions average in comparison to other students to determine your eligibility. Some of the programs do have additional requirements. So if we're looking at something like the Bachelor of Health Sciences, that one does have a supplemental application, which is going to be a written essay-style response. Fine Arts, Dance and Music has an audition, and then Fine Arts Visual Studies has a portfolio that you have to provide to us. Now, when you apply, you will get all of the outlines and guidelines for these auditions and portfolios and supplemental pieces, but it's just a good thing to keep in mind that there are some programs that do require supplemental application materials. And then all students must also demonstrate English language proficiency. So this is just a little bit about the admissions information. I have 2 slides of admissions information specific for education. So you can see here it is split up based on the grade level that you're looking for. So early childhood education here is on the left. All of them you'll see we have English Language Arts 30-1 or equivalent. So we accept kind of across curriculums across Canada and then across the world. It's just that English Language Arts 30-1 or equivalent. Then we also have mathematics 30-1 or 30-2 or equivalent again for early childhood education, 1 from this list here, and then 2 approved courses. One of those can be an approved option. Now, if you look here on the other side of the screen, you can see that we're looking more in the ELA fine arts, so English Language Arts and Fine Arts Visual Studies realm. So similar to the early childhood education, we're going to be looking for English, and then 2 from this list here. So you can see there's the sciences there, we have some social studies classes, Alberta mathematics, everything like that. And then 2 approved courses, again, 1 of which can be an approved option. So approved courses are going to be our more academically heavy courses. So think your math, your sciences, your English, your social studies. And then our approved options are going to be more focused on things like PE, dance, drama. If you do choir, all of those things can be used as that approved option. Now, kind of moving on to this slide here, we do have our mathematics and sciences on the left-hand side. So again, the big difference here is the Alberta Mathematics 30-1. So we're just looking at that 1 level of mathematics or equivalent. So for most students, you may know this as pre-calculus. And then 2 from this list here of our sciences, 1 approved course or option. I'm unmuted now. So we do have our social studies. So you can see here, same as all the other ones, English, and then social studies is one of the requirements for this concentration. And then 1 from this list here, and then 2 approved courses, again, 1 of which can be an approved option. So just some slight differences across the board, but relatively the same. Again, we're just looking for those 5 grade 12 courses. Now, if we kind of move on here, these are some important dates that we're looking for 2024-2025. So for any students who have a offer of admission for fall 2024, some of these dates are still going to be really important to you, like the May 1st decision deadline that's coming up. But this chart here is mainly for our fall 2025 applicants. So the application will open for international students on August 1st, 2024. And then for domestic students, it's going to open on October 1st, 2024. So a little bit of different dates there. And then across the board, these are just really good to keep in mind for prestige awards, our awards deadlines to finish classes and everything like that. This is all available on our website. So you'll never be able to miss a deadline, hopefully. But it's also good to kind of keep in mind here. And then this is just our Connect with Us slide. So these are just some ways to stay in contact with us. If you have any questions after the presentation today about gaining admission to the University of Calgary, you can scan this QR code here to connect with a recruiter in your region. You can download our viewbook in the center QR code, and then on the right-hand side is all of our social medias as well as one of our contact emails. So if you're not sure who to reach out to, but you know you want to get in contact with us, the Future Students email is a great contact for that because we'll be able to send you wherever you need to go. We do have our Facebook and Instagram and our Pinterest. We do have the Choose UCalgary podcast as well. If you listen to season 8, you will hear my voice again. And then we also have our Choose UCalgary YouTube channel. So after the lecture tonight, we will be posting this sample lecture to the YouTube channel. You can also view all of our previous ones that we've done so far in this series, as well as all the upcoming ones once they're done. So if you missed any part of the lecture tonight and you'd like to rewatch it, you can access it on that Choose UCalgary YouTube channel. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. If you have any questions for Amy or myself, please feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat function. I'm just going to go off camera here and off mic and give Amy the floor for any questions that she gets. But again, any admissions questions that you have, feel free to ask them in the chat and I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, do let me know if you have any questions. I will say that, you know, it's there's an awful lot of information, not just on the website for admissions, but also, you know, I encourage you to take a wander around the undergraduate programs and education website. It will give you a nice description of all of the programs that we offer, and you'll be able to see to the structure, the ways in which they happen. One thing that I will mention is that we do a field experience in every single semester of the 4 semesters that we have that are called education semesters. And what I really love about this is it really gives us a chance to get you out into schools early, to start asking some of those big questions that are so important to all of us. If you have any question at all, please feel free to put it in the chat. Kara, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we might be done for the evening.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, last call for questions here. If nothing comes up, or if you think of any questions after the fact, oh, we've got one here. Yes, we do have resident services at UCalgary. So if you have any questions about resident services, you can reach out to us and we'll send you where you need to go. But we do offer a guaranteed first-year residence as well as second, third, and fourth-year residence. So the entire degree, there are residence options available to you, Matt. Oh, not residence. Let me just find some links for you here, Matt. So, Matt, if you're talking about living on campus while you're studying with us, that would be resident services. But if you're wondering about living on campus outside of being a student, that's usually kind of reserved for students who are taking part in a camp or a group. As residents will typically just give rooms to current students. But if you do have any questions, I can put the residents' email in the chat for you if you'd like to reach out with them. Okay, so Matt, I'm just going to send you an email with that contact in it for you. Okay, no worries. Yeah, if you need any more information about resident services, they basically do all the dormitories on campus. You can reach out to them. They have a resident services email, and they'll be able to help you with anything that you have questions about. And I think that might be all of our questions for the night. So I think we might call it Amy. Thank you so much for presenting for students tonight. I know I really enjoyed hearing about it, and I'm sure everyone else enjoyed as well. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. And thank you everyone who participated in the event tonight for listening in.
Bye, everyone.